Hey guys, Wyatt Claypool here, and I am back to tell you the tale of Canada's most ridiculous member of parliament, that being MP Randy Boissonnault from the riding of Edmonton Centre. This guy, despite how ridiculous and corrupt he is still not only a member of the Liberal Party caucus, he is still part of the Liberal government cabinet. He is our Minister of Employment and Jobs somehow, and that is going to become a more ridiculous fact as I lay out the story of this man. It is crazy that he has not been forced to resign yet, considering all of the problems he's causing for the Liberal government. I guess it's kind of fantastic because as a conservative, I want the Liberals to be exposed for how ridiculous and corrupt they are overall. And Randy Boissonnault is the poster child for making it clear why we should never re-elect the Liberals to government again. But I'm going to go back a little bit into Randy's history before we catch up to some of the updates on what's been going on with him since the last video I made about him just a week ago. Yes, the news has been moving so fast, there is a substantial amount of stuff to talk about since last week. But before I get into it all, I just want to remind you guys, if you're watching this video and you like this channel, make sure to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Around 75% of people watching any given video I make are not actually subscribers, even if they've watched several videos I've made over the past few months. Anyways, so the Randy Boissonnault's electoral history is good to nail down first here, because even though he's had 2 terms in government, they've been 2 non-consecutive terms. He was first elected in Edmonton Centre back in 2015, but was defeated back in 2019. And then he wasn't an MP between 19 and 21 when he was then re-elected to this current parliament. That's key because when you do serve in government, especially when you're in the cabinet, you can't really be doing other business pursuits on the side. But when he was defeated in 2019 and the COVID-19 pandemic started up, Randy Boissonnault and his very sketchy friends started something called Global Health Imports. Now, this is basically just a corrupt company in order to sell contracts to other more competent companies who can actually bring in masks, ventilators, or any other supplies that the government or hospitals want. Because he has connections inside the Liberal government, global health initiatives were able to get massive contracts from them and then basically just sell the contract to somebody else. They had nothing to do with actually acquiring medical supplies or doing anything health related. They would basically just be a middleman importer who would simply connect people without ever actually having to touch product or do anything in terms of logistics. They are useless. This is just standard government graft and corruption. Now, to get some of these contracts, Randy Boissonnault was basically able to get a foot up because he claimed, or at least the evidence suggests he claimed, that this was an Indigenous-owned company. Because Randy Boissonnault, before he was defeated in 2019 and since he rejoined the government in 2021, has always sat in Parliament's Indigenous caucus, implying heavily that he is an Indigenous person. And it's definitely not his business partner, Joseph Anderson here, who is the one or Stephen Anderson, who is claiming to be Indigenous. This man is the whitest person on the planet, and he looks like he might have been the man who invented cocaine back in the day. This guy is obviously, with his last name Anderson, is not going to be the one who's proposing that maybe we should claim that we're Indigenous owned. I think it's the man named Randy Boissonnault, who, despite not being Indigenous at all, could maybe plausibly claim that he is Métis. And that is effectively what kind of came out in the last week here. Randy Boissonnault got caught once they were investigating his corruption that his firm had been pretending to be Indigenous owned. And I'm just going to bring this up on screen here because this was the most ridiculous part. The thing Randy Boissonnault did first upon this news coming out was blame Stephen Anderson for why Global Health Imports was claiming to be Indigenous owned. Again, he was claiming that Stephen Anderson, this guy, was claiming they were Indigenous owned. That doesn't really make any sense. Stephen Anderson is obviously not the one who has the plausible ability to claim he's Indigenous. It's obviously Randy Boissonnault. And Randy basically says, well, Stephen just thought I was Indigenous and then said we were Indigenous owned. That didn't really make sense. Like Randy Boissonnault is the guy who is going to have the most experience with working in government in order to get contracts. He has the connections to the Liberal Party. Why would he be the one filling out the paperwork? Why would Stephen Anderson be the one filling out the paperwork? And this week, now Randy Boissonnault has had to come out and say, well, I was never really that clear that I don't actually have an Indigenous background. Here's a report from CTV News. And I just want to go down to this part, which is really ridiculous, on how he would basically phrase whether or not he's Indigenous. Randy would say he is non-status adopted Cree. So Randy Boissonnault is adopted. He was adopted into a Métis family in which the claim is that the great-grandmother was full-blooded Cree. Okay, that's great. You're still as white as Elizabeth Warren. You don't get to just adopt your way into then saying that you're Indigenous. Now, we can have a discussion on whether or not the government should even be valuing whether a firm is Indigenous owned or Black owned or Indian owned or white owned. I think it's all silly. But those are the rules. He knows those are the rules. And by his own political stripe, he would consider this a massive racist violation of this program. So after he tried to throw Stephen Anderson under the bus, that went pear-shaped really quickly, and now he's being investigated for massive corruption in basically warping the contract, the grant, the contracting programs, the contracting portals in government. Now, we have some more stuff to talk about, because then there was another aspect of the story I talked about last time involving cocaine. You know, who could guess that this guy would somehow be involved in a story about cocaine? Uh, there was a business. This guy, Stephen Anderson, his friend, his associate. Not that they work together in a literal sense, although that's going to get really fuzzy in a second here. When she was flying out of the Dominican Republic, I believe, she had tried to smuggle like 40 kilograms of cocaine on a plane and was caught and now is being prosecuted for it. That is a not unsubstantial amount of cocaine. You don't have to deal coke to know that that is like Pablo Escobar amounts of cocaine to try and smuggle on a plane. And for a while, it just seemed like that's a neat little funny part of the story. You know, these people are friends with people dealing cocaine. Randy thinks is pretending he's Indigenous. They're stealing government contracts to basically sell them to other people to actually fulfill them. It's nonsense. Oh, and by the way, another rub of all this is Randy Boissonnault was also effectively running global health imports. At the same time, he was also in cabinet. So when he got reelected, he did not leave the board. He kept operating the business. And then when people were like, well, who's this Randy doing all this stuff while you're in government? And he said, oh, that's the other Randy, and which has become such a meme in Canadian politics that everything is just the other Randy. This is a firm with about 4 idiots working for it, and he's the only one named Randy. They can't get a last name on who this other Randy is. They have no phone number, email records of how to contact him. I guess they were talking to him by carrier pigeon. Or maybe Randy Boissonnault is a ridiculous liar. Hilarious liar. That does make the story a little bit better. At least we'll get a chuckle out of it. But he is a liar. But now, this is the new thing that's happened on the cocaine element. Here's from the National Post. Cabinet ministers firm shared mailing address with person named in cocaine bust. I don't know how this gets even crazier. I don't even need to read you the details because that's basically what was going on here. You got to know somebody pretty well to be sharing a mailing address for your highly profitable company with them. And when they're massively into trafficking cocaine, that sounds a little bit like, you know, we might want to see if you have any deeper connections with these people. And this story resulted in a very funny clip in Parliament where somebody gets up and they demand that Conservative MP Michael Barrett apologize for his unparliamentary behavior, his unparliamentary speech in referring to Randy Boissonnault as Cocaine Randy. This needs to be seen to be believed.
I see that the Honourable Minister is rising on a point of order. The Honourable Minister for International Development.
The Honourable Member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes, at the conclusion of asking his question, as he was sitting down, called the Minister of Employment and Workforce Development Cocaine Randy. That is extremely unparliamentary. And I ask you, Mr. Speaker, to ask him to withdraw that remark. Thank you very much.
Can I just say, we should also start referring to Ahmed Hussein as Hamas Hussein, because that guy also went to Gaza to basically stump against the IDF fighting terrorists. But why would you even give Michael Barrett this setup? And I am proud to say Michael Barrett just dunked on him here.
I see that the member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes is rising in response to this point of order.
Speaker, I'm sure that I was referring to the other Randy as Cocaine Randy.
Parliament can often be very boring, and when you give an MP like Michael Barrett a setup like that, dude, he's coming over the top to dunk on you, because the parliamentary language rules are so silly. You can't say anything even tinged with negativity about another MP. And the fact that he was able to scoot through Cocaine Randy, and then upon correction, he could use Randy's own stupid excuse as his excuse for not... No, I wasn't referring to him. I wasn't trying to disparage Randy Boissonnault. No, I was just disparaging other Randy. Because, as we all know, other Randy has nothing in common with Randy Boissonnault. Oh my goodness. These people don't deserve to be in government, is the lesson here. And I am very happy that the Conservative Party and Pierre Poilievre is now drilling on this issue of how corrupt this guy is. Pierre Poilievre says this man is a total fraud, just like his boss. He lied about having Indigenous heritage. His company profited off of tens of thousands of government dollars in contracts while he was a minister. Randy Boissonnault must resign. Sign here if you agree. I would say it gets even worse than that. Yes, he made tens of thousands of dollars on his company once he was in Parliament, but that was late into COVID. He had also fleeced taxpayers for millions of dollars previously, before 2022, when he was just taking these contracts, not fulfilling them, and then giving them to other people. By the way, there are several hospitals or other health firms now suing Global Health Imports because they would get contracts, get paid to fulfill them, and then not deliver any of the medical supplies that they were supposed to, because it turns out they were a useless middleman organization who doesn't even actually know many connections in the East in order to import masks, ventilators, and all these other things that these hospitals needed. This man is a full fabrication. He should not be in Parliament at all. And the fact that he hasn't had to sit in front of a parliamentary committee or be investigated by the RCMP yet is utterly ridiculous. But what can you say? He is the most ridiculous MP, so the way that the government treats him and sort of soft toes around all of his obvious corruption is all part of the fun at this point. Anyways, that should be it for me today, guys. Again, if you like the show, make sure you're subscribed. If you haven't subscribed yet, like the video, leave a comment, and if you want to support us, you can donate to the Give, Send, Go legal fund in the description below, as well as pinned at the top of the comments. We're being sued by a Chinese billionaire developer who has a history of maxing out donations to Justin Trudeau and people like Aaron O'Toole. We did a report mentioning him. We were completely factual. In fact, we were mostly just citing previous reporting from the Globe and Mail about him, and he's tried to sue me now for $900,000. And I've spent about $33,000 defending myself, so that's why if you donate anything to that legal fund, it helps take the burden of cost off of me a bit. And also in the comments, I leave my website, wyattclaypool.com. If you guys want to sign up there, no matter what part of Canada you're in, I basically will try and give, as the list grows, because right now it's not big enough for me to start sending out emails to people. But as the list grows, what I can do is give recommendations for both federal and provincial nominations for MLAs and MPs, as well as give you my take on different leadership races that either happen federally or provincially, and so that we can try and get the maximally conservative person in on all these positions that that we kind of weigh in on as a team here, I guess. So the TNT squad can try and send in a bunch of people in all these given races to make sure we vote down ballot in order of who's the most conservative and reliable to the least conservative and reliable, also known as a red Tory. Anyways, so that's it for me today, guys. Have a good one.